Frollo is the app that several thousand single parents say has been life-changing for them in the most profound way. If you're a single parent and want to connect with other single parents and open yourself up to an amazing support network and new experiences, then the Frollo app is the one for you. The Frollo app has two modes: community mode for meetups and holidays, guidance and support, chats, and discovery to make it easy to find like-minded local single parents near you. Dating mode is a mindful, safe, and respectful dating offering where everybody is there to date another single parent. All users on Frollo are verified, putting our user safety first always. The Frollo app is free to download and use, with the option to upgrade to premium for access to lots of additional premium features for an elevated experience, which makes it easier than ever to access the incredible connections and experiences you're looking for. To download Frollo, search for Frollo, Frollo, on the App or Google Play Store, or go to www.frollo.com for more info. We can't wait to see you on the app soon. Hi, I'm Zoe Desmond, the founder of Frollo, the award-winning app for single parents that features both community and dating modes. And I'm also co-author, along with my wonderful friend Rebecca Cox, that I made through Frollo, of the book How to Be a Happy Single Parent. Hello and welcome to another episode of the Frollo podcast. Today I am joined by the wonderful Dr. Rachel Master, who is a clinical psychologist. And Rachel, you're so welcome to the Frollo podcast.
Very happy to be here.
It's fab to have you on. We have been in contact for years now, I think. It's crazy how time flies.
Well, exactly. I think especially as a single parent, time does fly, doesn't it?
You took the words out of my mouth, especially when you're a single parent juggling all of the balls in the air. But to start off, it would be amazing to give our listeners an insight into what it is that you do.
Okay, well, it's hard to do this in a nutshell. But I spend 3 days a week in my NHS job. And actually, the last couple of years, I've been working in a maternal mental health service. So my bread and butter is working with women, mothers. But in my private practice as well, I take on all sorts of different clients. But my particular specialism is working with women. I'm very passionate about working with solo parents and anyone really who's confronting the kind of difficult transitions in life, which often does mean, whether it's separation, divorce, navigating parenting, dealing with loss, grief, and all the traumas related to that as well.
All extremely relevant to our listeners. So I'm really excited to get into the conversation. And just to give some context, you're a single parent yourself. So it would be really good to hear about what your situation, single parent situation is, or how it came to be this way, and is this what kind of brought you into the work that you're doing, or how did all of that happen?
Okay, let's think how I'm going to say this in a coherent way. So I guess I've been a single mum, solo parent, whatever you would want to call it, for about actually coming on to 7 years, 6.5 years, which even when I say it out loud, it's quite overwhelming to think it's been that long, because it, like we were just saying earlier, it really, in many ways, feels not that long at all, but in other ways, yeah, it feels like an eternity. So I became a solo parent quite kind of abruptly, after quite a few. We'd been together a really long time, my ex-husband and I. So it was a 16-year relationship, actually. And all I'd ever known was being in relationships. I'd kind of been a bit of a serial monogamist. And there I was at the age of 39 with 2 really young kids. So at the point at which we separated, I think my eldest, God, I'm trying to work it out now. How old was she? She was about 5, 6 years old. And my son was just 3. So really young. And I remember it was just, it was a real awakening of, having to confront everything, really. I went, not only working out who I was on my own and kind of having always had a partner, dealing with the obvious breakup and what that means and the heartache and the kind of coming to terms with a life that I hadn't expected. But then obviously, as you know very well, on top of that, having to then navigate being a solo parent and all the needs of my very young kids who really needed me, and all the demands and difficulties that come with that, and juggling it with a very busy and demanding job. And I just remember I just couldn't quite believe it when it happened, that this was what so many people's normal life was. And, that this was just something you expect to just get on with. And, it wasn't really spoken about. And I remember at the time I had quite a demanding job working in child and adolescent mental health. And I was kind of just expected to just get on with it, go carry on being a psychologist, supporting all these other people, just kind of be the parent, be the strong one, be the everything, really. Deal with the difficult ex-partner and all the complicated financial fallout that comes with that, moving house. It was just so much. It was just so much. And I guess what it really made me think about is just that there's so much you can do in terms of support and help for so many people who are going through that experience. And I remember when I first came across you, it was a few years ago, but just thinking, wow, this is so exciting, because there really needs to be more community support for people going through this, because it felt so incredibly isolating. That was the kind of main memory I have of those early years, is just how isolated I felt in my experience.
Yeah, it's always hearing someone else recount those early days. And you and I think, have been on a really similar timeline. It's been 6.5 years for me as well.
Oh, really? That's 7. Interesting.
Yeah.
We're going through it so similar, yeah.
Yeah. And, it's when I hear you explaining how you felt, it's like you speaking my words. And people have said that to me when, so I think it's something that really does, it's such a relatable thing for newly single parents, especially. There's different situations. There's widows, there's solo parents by choice, of course, and then there's single parents who come into the experience through separation. But it is just all exactly as you say, all of these things that you're navigating, the finances, the having to figure out how to be a solo parent, dealing with your own emotions and trauma about the situation. Unfortunately, we don't get to just get into bed for a month and eat ice cream and watch movies.
Absolutely. And I remember at the time feeling really angry about that, really angry that I didn't get to do the breakup stuff and the kind of feeling sorry for myself, because there's just no time for that, is there, when you're parenting? And and that's why it's such a challenging thing to go through. And only people who've gone through it can understand.
Yeah, because it's like everything thrown into the pot all at once. Yeah, it is so full on. And so what then did that kind of inspire you to move in a certain direction with your work?
Yeah, I just more and more found myself kind of having a lot of compassion, really, for other, maybe particularly women, but I'm not going to single out women, because I know there's a lot of solo parents on their own, dads dealing with similar issues as well. But, just the struggles with that. And I guess I felt like I had this advantage in that, I had my therapeutic training and I learned so much from the work that I do. And I've kind of skilled myself up over the years, and specifically looking at, working with trauma and resourcing and how to, process all these huge feelings. And I just felt like this is something I really care about. I feel really like there's not enough out there specifically thinking about these issues and how to hold and support space for these single parents who are going through this. So while I don't only work with solo parents, it's something that I really, going forward, I'd like to sort of really try to create something really quite tailored for that group. And I have had worked a lot with solo parents along the way, but I'd really like to kind of make something which is even more specifically tailored for that group. So whether it's women's groups or retreats, I've got so many ideas actually about how to move this forward, because it is a real passion of mine.
I love the idea of that because, like we've just discussed, there are just so many similar themes, aren't there, that single parents, you know, are dealing with, and even in terms of trauma, maybe of whatever has happened, then the overwhelm, and then also the fear maybe of even opening up to new relationships because of what might happen.
So, we haven't even talked about dating, have we? That's a whole other
I know. This is it. We need a 7-hour podcast to go through it all. But what would you say are the kind of most common themes that come up in your work with single parents?
I mean, and I think the big one for me is this kind of the overwhelm. It's the feeling of how do I look after myself amongst all of the things I'm having to manage. You know, so many women speak about this sense of neglect, really neglecting of their self. And just running on empty, you know, their cup is empty. I've got quite a few single mum friends as well, and we have a lot of solidarity around that. You know, like when do we get to like fill up our cups even just by a little bit, you know, because it's just impossible. So I guess it's dealing with the overwhelm. It's thinking about, okay, so let's be pragmatic. We're very limited in the time we have to ourselves. We're very limited probably with resources financially. So what can we do with what we have got? And then there's a lot of it, I think, ends up being grief work. So, you know, thinking about, you know, grief, it comes in so many different shapes and sizes. But I think there is a lot of grief in the population of solo parents. You know, it's grieving of the life that they didn't get, the traditional kind of how they imagined their life to shape up in this family with however you want to describe it, the kind of very traditional narrative of what a family should look like. And suddenly this is gone, and they have to come to terms with the loss, but also they have to then find a new way of moving forward and imagining a different kind of life and what that might look like. And I think it's not only the grief for yourself, but it's also, I think it's really difficult to come to terms with what you maybe haven't been able to, all the perfect life that you might have wanted to give to your children. And I think that comes up quite a lot. This kind of sense
I think that...
powerlessness, I suppose, in terms of how much control you've had over that.
Yeah, that was something I really, really struggled with in the early days. Just that, you know, this family unit that I'd always wanted to create. And I was so clung on to this idea. This was so important to me. It was like, this is what I know that I want in my life. And so it's exactly as you say, it's the grief of holding on so closely to that thing. And it was so tough. And then of course, the same thing for my son, just the feeling of failure that I hadn't been able to make that happen for him, you know, even into a year of his life. And, but kind of with that, and Rebecca Cox and I, who wrote the book, How to Be a Happy Single Parent, and in our discussion, actually, it was the last episode of the last season of the solo or of the Frodo podcast, we were discussing exactly this and saying that on the other side of that, when the whole way that society has taught us to think of what's important and, you know, putting sort of certain things that should happen in your life into boxes, and this is the way it looks like. But then when that is kind of, I guess, deconstructed the way it has to be for someone going through this experience, there is something personally I have found really, really liberating
Absolutely.
about
That's the word I
that.
was going to say. It's freeing, isn't it?
Yeah, completely. Because I'm kind of like, wow, this, it doesn't look like the way I imagined it to, but this is, I'm the best version of me right now compared to what I would have been. And it's like taught me so much. I feel like I'm a better mom.
Yeah,
My,
100%. There's
yeah,
so many gains, aren't there, on the other
so many
side?
gains,
I
so
think,
many gains.
connecting with that and kind of you have to move through the grief and you have to kind of takes a while to get there, and I don't think you can force it as a process. I think you kind of have to move through. But yeah, on the other side, isn't it brilliant? I mean, I really love where I am at the moment. I feel so resilient in myself. I feel like you could throw anything at me and I'd manage, I'd hold,
I love that.
and it's really nice to know that old me of sort of 10 years ago would never have believed I'd get to where I am and feel so strong. And it's a great thing.
Exactly. And that's why I always feel like I just want to talk about this for anyone listening who is like right at the start, who's in that place of, how would this ever possibly be okay again? Just because there is just, it can be such a tough journey, but yeah, it can be so great, on the other side. So what are some of well, actually, I'd love to go back to because you mentioned overwhelm is a really big thing. So
Absolutely.
yeah. So, and you also mentioned quite rightly that a lot of single parents, don't have, are kind of, struggling financially. And, there are some single parents who are completely solo parents without any co-parent or, support, who, have even more sort of pressures without the kind of windows of time to, go off and go to a spa day or things like this. So what are your top tips?
Top tips. Yeah, I've had to think about this before coming on because I thought there's so much I could say here. So I really needed to kind of distill some ideas down. And I think some of these things I'm going to share are things that I know work really well, and I use all of them for myself. So I tried and tested by me as well as my clients. So I think it can really great, I think, when you're a solo parent and people go on about, asking for help and creating a community and all that. It almost puts extra pressure on you as a solo parent that you've got to kind of find all these things around you. And obviously your app is amazing for that. And if, finding your support system is so important. And I've got some incredible friends who are single parents who I'm constantly on WhatsApp, voice noting every single day, and it holds me together, absolutely. But what I wanted to talk about today was what is the internal kind of resources and how you support yourself when no one's around. Maybe it's, your kid's having a tantrum and it's 10 p.m. and, you literally don't know how you're going to cope. No one else is seeing what you're going through. It's those moments. This is what I'm going to kind of be thinking about is what do you do when you're in that overwhelm and, you've got your kids on your own and you don't, your cup is empty. I think we're all familiar with that, aren't we? So I wanted to talk about, there's a couple of things here that I was going to go through. So one thing I find really, really helpful is an exercise where you learn to connect with your most wise, competent part of yourself. So when we get really overwhelmed, I think what happens is we almost get, if you imagine we have all these different parts of ourselves that get triggered in different situations. And I know for myself, when I get overwhelmed, it's almost like this inner kid inside of me who is just like, what about me? What about my needs? It's a really kind of, it's almost like a freaked out, angry, rageful, overwhelmed little kid that gets like, and it really feels like that, it feels almost like I can feel a rage coming up inside of me. So I've spent time now, like just kind of trying to notice when I'm kind of being triggered and when older, younger parts of me are kind of coming out and really wanting to be seen. But before I, do anything with those parts, I try to spend that time connecting with my most grown-up, competent part. So it's almost like, okay, so there's all these different parts, but there is also a part of me that has got my shit together. And that actually I know, because I know a million brilliant single parents, that we are all amazing and that we've all had to dig deep and that we all have incredible resilience. So how do we connect with that? So I would ask you to really, maybe you could journal, or you could just do a bit of a kind of moment of inner reflection, but try to bring to mind a time when you've really felt competent. And I want you to almost visualize this. So I know with some clients, they're like, oh, I never feel competent. So, okay, so just think of any time in your life where you thought, you know what, I know what I'm doing. It doesn't have to be as a parent. It can be in a job interview. It can be talking to a friend and giving them advice. Or it can be like, comforting a friend, comforting your own children. But just trying to connect with those moments where you feel competent. And while you connect, I want you to kind of notice how you felt in that in terms of your body. So, let's say you're thinking of yourself when you did a really good interview. So think about how you felt in yourself when you knew that what you were saying made sense and people thought you were competent. How are you holding yourself? How do you feel in your body? And just spend a few seconds remembering how that feels, because this is the you that you can always come back to and connect, the grown-up you that has its shit together. And along with thinking about competence, you can kind of bring any quality that you're needing to connect with in that moment. So it could be nurturing. It could be like, think about yourself when you're feeling really cared for and loved in a kind of really accepted way, whether it's from a family member, whether it is from one of your kids, or whether it's from a friend. Just remember how that felt. And try to, again, tune into your body. How does it feel when you're receiving or being seen in those ways through those eyes? And a similar thing could be in terms of wisdom, like your inner wisdom. So you could think about times when people think you know that the person you're with in that relationship is seeing what you say as wise, and you're feeling that in your body, that they respect what you have to say. So it really is up to you what the qualities you want to connect with are, but I think spending some time either journaling or reflecting on those moments and then practicing connecting with that can make a huge difference in those moments of overwhelm.
Wow.
Once you kind of get to that, it's from this place of kind of grown-up part, or whether you want to call it wise self, or whether you want to even just call it getting on with normal life part, whatever you want to call it, or just self. You can then try to have some space to notice what's getting activated. So you can kind of go, okay, what's coming up here? Some people find it really good to visualize it almost like you're in a circle, like in a kind of meeting conference room, or in a meditation circle, or you can even imagine it as you're on a bus and you're imagining all the people, all the different characters or parts of you that are getting activated. Is there like a really anxious person here? Is there a really angry part of you here? And it's almost like, this all sounds a bit abstract, but if you can get into the practice of connecting with your competent part and then seeing how you feel towards all the other things that are coming up, it's quite a powerful practice.
Rachel, I have an example of this just a couple of days ago, actually.
Oh, really?
Yeah, this is really helpful. I've never heard about this described this way, but I felt like I had an out-of-body experience when I was dealing with my son. It was just before bedtime, which I find so stressful sometimes. It's like when my capacity is, at its lowest, when my tolerance is kind of low. I'm usually, all the overwhelm of the day, all of this, trying to get my son to bed. He's prancing about and pushing my buttons.
Oh, yes, they're good at that. They're good at pushing the buttons.
Yes, and so I feel like that is my weak moment for kind of, my weak moment in terms of tolerance. And so we were having one of those moments, and I was just sitting on I was kind of, it frozen almost. And he, we're having this, I don't know, episode, and he was shouting and screaming at me, and I could see, okay, he is exhausted. And also it was a handover day. He'd been with his dad the day before. So handover days can be, tricky sometimes. I don't know what time he's gone to bed at, all of that stuff. And so I was just sat there, and I kind of almost like did freeze. And part of me wanted to just start shouting at him, going, I've had a heart, come on now, I've had enough, and it's time for bed, and that's it, and just stop being so dramatic. And then another
that's the part of you, isn't it, that's like not getting your own needs met.
Exactly. And just almost like kind of thinking of him as on my level, why don't you understand about me? And exactly what you said.
It's your inner child, isn't it?
Yeah. And then there was another part of me that kind of remembered being him in, a kid, basically. I remembered being a kid, and I remembered, my parents being in that, sort of state, and how that felt. And so I just I don't know, I was able to consciously choose then in that moment. Yeah. But by the way, this is not,
that's a great example, and I'm
not
just
a regular thing
that you could even, because what you've described there is that you had an ability to step back. Because I think that's the hardest thing, isn't it? Like when you're triggered or in a moment like that, like you say, so under-resourced, it's very hard to even have a moment to distance yourself from the activated part of yourself, to be able to go, okay, that's maybe a younger version of me that's really finding it hard because her needs are not being met, and it's very hard to be in a situation where you're not looking after yourself and you'll have to look after someone else. I see this.
Yeah.
You're not acting from it. You're not reacting from it. You're noticing it. And then you're also then making a choice to connect with another part that sounds much more able to be compassionate and have a kind of bigger perspective on the situation. That's super impressive, Zoe. I'm just very impressed that you were able to do that.
Oh, thank you. That is really... it's really lovely to hear, because as single parents, we don't have someone else in, telling us. So no, I did. Do you know what? And this is whether this is relevant or not, but it made my absolute year, I have to say, later than when so I just put my arms around him, and I just kind of, settled him down, and that was fine. And then I got him into bed, and he just turned around and he just said, and he doesn't call me mommy. He calls me mom. He hasn't called me mommy in years, because he's, a cool guy. He's into football. He's 7. And he just said, I really love you, mommy. And I know. And it was just like, honestly.
And it's what you needed to hear as well.
It's what I needed. So it was like this, delayed kind of, thing that happened. But I'll never forget that moment. It was just so unexpected, such a gorgeous surprise.
Authentic.
And it was just so lovely. But it's, so hearing what you've described there makes complete sense to me, because I feel like that's what what happened a couple of days ago, and it really helped. And I guess it's everything, isn't it? It's teaching our brains to not just flip into reactivity.
It's obviously hard, and I guess I want to make a big point of that, to say that this is not something that you can flick a switch and be able to do. It takes practice. And I think, hand on heart, I've practiced it every day since becoming a solo parent. And sometimes I'm not so good at it, and other times I'm much better. But I feel at the moment I'm pretty good. It's, even in the most stressful of times, I can kind of, even if it means taking myself away and going to the toilet for 6 breaths, I am able to kind of reconnect with my most wise, competent part and make my choices from there, rather than from my really activated parts. And that alone, I will say, is probably the most helpful thing that I've learned. It's the kind of like, accessing those inner resources.
Yeah. And then because it has such a knock-on effect, doesn't it? Because like the amount of like guilt that we feel, all of this, the guilt, the worry, and to be able to, move through everything we have to deal with in a more considered and compassionate way, is so important. So it would be amazing to hear how you work with people. So say if there's a single parent listening to this episode of the podcast and is thinking, I need Dr. Rachel in my life, what happens? What is the process, and how is there a time period that you work with people? Do you work with people in person or over Zoom?
Well, I mean, at the moment, I do have I'm going to probably be doing more private work as time goes on. At the moment, I only have a few slots a week. I've not got loads of availability, but I have some free slots. So my website, www.rachelmaster.co.uk, I had to pause there to remember. You can contact me through there. So while my availability for one-to-one sessions is sometimes limited, I'm super interested in creating some more accessible options for single parents. And that might be through groups, and they might even be virtual groups where it will be more affordable, but it can also be something that could be a kind of space of, maybe an hour a week, but it could be a much more long-running sort of therapeutic space. That's something I've been thinking that would be a good offer for people who I know maybe can't afford the usual therapy options. So do get in touch if that's something you would think about. But yeah, in terms of your question about how long, what do you offer, it really is how long's a piece of string. I think because I'm a clinical psychologist, it's quite an advantage in that we are trained in quite a lot of different models. So I can work in a more time-restricted way. Again, if people are limited in funds and they want to have help with something specifically, like making sense of a trauma, grief, trying to, specific disorders around anxiety, low mood. Obviously, I can offer something, 12 to 16 sessions. But equally, I do really enjoy a deep dive and more longer term work as well, where you can look a bit more closely at patterns and dynamics and how they played out, and maybe even looking back into your childhood and attachment and all these things that often have links to how things have played out in your adult life. So amazing. I guess in answer to your question, that was quite a vague answer, but there really is so many different ways you can work therapeutically as a psychologist.
Oh, well, what an opportunity to delve fully into things and and I guess rewire and reset, and to kind of give ourselves the best the best perspective and opportunity going forward. And I know that you are going to be hosting a Frollo meetup, which we will organise, and which will be, all details will be in the show notes by the time this episode goes live, which is so exciting. And I know that our community are, very, very big fans of what you do.
Well, I'm just super passionate about accessibility because I just, there's so many kind of ideas, therapy ideas, psychology ideas that you can share, and it can make a big difference. And, for people who can't necessarily commit or afford to one-to-one, it's really nice to be able to share some of that knowledge. And obviously I've been through it myself, so I know how much some of these tools can make a difference.
For sure. Well, so excited to get to, so excited for your meetup. And Dr. Rachel, thank you for your time and your words of wisdom and sharing your story. And there's, like I said, there's probably, we could have made this last 7 hours through all of the things we could talk about.
I haven't said.
We'll just have to have another conversation and pick up for part 2 of this episode. I'd love that.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And obviously people can ask me questions and get in touch if, there's any specific questions they're wanting a bit more ideas around. Obviously I can't offer lots of sorry, I'm rambling now.
Not at all.
Just if people want to get in touch and they're interested, they know where to go. Yeah.
So you're on www.rachelmaster.co.uk. Okay, and
I'll give you the address.
And your Instagram for people to find you is
the solo parent psychologist, actually, which I haven't used for a long time, but I'm now planning to reactivate it. This is my opportunity to do a bit more work with that. So
fab, amazing. Well, thank you so much, Dr. Rachel. It's been so lovely chatting with you, and excited for your Frollo meetup coming soon.
Absolutely, so lovely to see you too.
And that's a wrap for this week. I hope you enjoyed this week's episode. If you did, then I have one small favour to ask. Please can you take a minute to subscribe to the Frollo podcast and give us a rating and review? This really helps other single parents who might benefit from it find us. The Frollo app, which is fully user verified for user safety, is available on the Google Play Store and the App Store, and you can find out more info and download links at www.frollo.com or follow us on Instagram at FrolloApp. And you can purchase your copy of our book, How to Be a Happy Single Parent, at all the major book retailers. Until next time, have a great week.